everyone. Okay, so I'm going to apologize right off the top. Um, I know that this video is going to be really dark. I'm at work. Surprise, surprise. And get myself centered here. I'm at work, and our light bulb decided that it was going to take a day off. So I'm sitting in the dark, and this is the only place with a desk where I can sit. So, I figured today I was going to do a video um, about having your bird um, DNA sexed or sexed by other methods. I'll get to those in a minute. But the importance of knowing whether or not your bird is a male or female. Now, I know a lot of people say, oh, well, I'm not interested in breeding, so I don't really care, or, um, why does it really matter? There's a few things that I think people overlook when they have birds, and they can cause a lot of problems if you're really interested in birds and you want to make sure that your bird has the best quality of life that you can provide for it. So the first thing that I'm gonna cover is people who only have one bird. Now, most of the time, people who only have one bird don't go out of their way to find out whether their bird is a male or female. There's no risk of them having babies. There's no risk of um, any sort of thing like that. The only thing I would caution people in this case is um, a condition called egg binding. And what happens is some birds will attempt to deliver an egg and it'll get stuck along the way. Now, if you don't know whether your bird is a male or female and your bird starts showing some weird signs all of a sudden and you don't know, you could assume that your bird is just feeling under the weather when in reality we're talking like a life-threatening now or never kind of situation. So, I know that this is a very common thing with cockatiels, so I encourage cockatiel owners to ask their breeders if they know if it's a male or female. There is a way to determine, depending on the mutation of cockatiels and some other birds, just the color mutation in general will tell you whether or not it's a male or female. For example, pearled cockatiels, a true pearl has to be a female. You can have male pearls, but what happens is after their first molt, they lose that pearling effect on their feathers. So if you have a 5-year-old pearl, then you know that it has to be a female. Genetically speaking, it has to be female. It's the same thing with a white face. If you have a true white face, meaning that the face and head is actually white, with no cheek patches, then, and it's an older bird, it has to be a male, because female white faces actually don't have a white face. They have a gray face. So in the case of egg binding, I think it's a good thing to at least be aware of what sex your bird might be, or at least be aware of the fact that egg binding does happen, and it's very life-threatening, and it needs to be dealt with like yesterday kind of thing. The other reason why you might want to have your bird DNA sexed or sexed in general is because, if you have, like I have a very bird-friendly environment. I do the whole bird room flock kind of thing, and I always like to know who is who in my flock, so that I can avoid any egg laying altogether. At one time, I had a male cockatiel. I was sure he was a male just because of his color mutation. He had to be a male. And 2 confirmed females. They were both white faces. Now, I never had a problem with them laying eggs. I always was very vigilant to make sure that there was no nesting sites, there was no, there was none of that. The other thing that I have that's kind of the upper hand, I have different species of birds, so my birds aren't overly comfortable having eggs with other birds around. So if you have a flock mentality or a flock group of birds, I think it's important to know who is who, so that if you notice, you know, two birds get a little frisky, you can either separate them, or you know that they're not just being social, that, you know, that there might actually be a problem. Um, the last reason why I think it's important to sex your bird is it kind of goes back to egg binding. Um, if your bird does have a tendency to lay eggs, or might shift towards that direction, you can prepare yourself, or your bird in that sense, of you can provide them with proper diet. You can provide them with certain stimuli that you know is not going to encourage your bird to lay eggs or anything of that sort. So there's a couple different ways you can sex a bird. I know that there's lots of information on the internet about visually sexing some birds. Um, I hold a lot of faith in some methods and absolutely none in others. Unless you are the proud owner of an eclectus parrot, you probably don't have the luxury of looking at your bird and knowing hands down what sex your bird is. Eclectuses, actually for almost 100 years, were considered, the males and females were considered completely different species, because the male is red, or the male is green and the female is red, so they didn't even know that they were the same bird because they were so strikingly different. Um, so unless you have a very obvious, um, what is it called, sexually dimorphic kind of bird, chances are you're going to have to do some dating. Like I said before, cockatiels, depending on the mutation, can have like a color-bound sex, so it's a little easier to be able to say, you know, okay, because of the genetics from these two parents, this baby has to be a male or a female. Because of the color mutation, it has to be a female, or it has to be a male. Not all birds are like that, and not all color mutations are like that. I have a female Lutino cockatiel that I thought was a male for many years. Actually, if you watch my cockatiel video, I actually referred to Chippy as a male, and she has since laid eggs. Um, so, obviously, he is not a he is a she. So, and if it does come to that, to your bird laying eggs, then you will obviously know whether it's a male or female. Um, so aside from color mutations that have been specifically bred into birds, birds like budgies, the cere, the part on their nose, tends to be a certain color depending on their sex. So females tend to have a more pinkish brown type of cere, where the males tend to have a more bluey purple sometimes. Now this isn't always set in stone, just like cockatoos. I'll get to that in a second. Because you can have a very purple seared female or a very pink seared male, where, you know, it's kind of hard to tell. My suggestion is to ask the advice of somebody who's a little bit more experienced if you're unsure. There are a few tricks to being a little bit more certain, but, you know, it's a somewhere to start at least. With cockatoos, a lot of people will say to you about cockatoos rather, that male cockatoos have brown eyes and female cockatoos have red eyes. And again, this isn't always the case. Firstly, there's a huge flaw with that way of thinking. Your larger cockatoos, like your mullicans and your umbrella cockatoos, the males actually have darker eyes, so they're closer to black, whereas the females have more of a brown eye. So if you had an umbrella cockatoo, and you were looking at the eyes of an umbrella cockatoo and said, they're brown, it must be a male. Well, it could actually be a female, because that rule doesn't apply to umbrella cockatoos. And then again, you can have very, very light-colored um, light-colored eyed male cockatoos and vice versa. You can have females with very dark eyes. Goonie actually is pretty much straight down the middle. His eyes aren't particularly dark, but they're not particularly light either. If you look at his eyes, they are clearly brown, but they're not a light brown, they're not a dark brown. They're kind of just floating in the middle. So I actually opted to have Goonie DNA sexed when a friend of mine, who's actually watching Goonie at the moment, we're doing some renovations, um, she has a Leicester sulfur-crested cockatoo. Freddie was about 30 years old before Charla, his new owner, her new owner, got her, and she had been told that Freddie was a male, and she actually isn't, and that was confirmed about 5 years ago when she started laying eggs. So she was quite old when she started laying eggs. She's now 38 and has been laying eggs for about 5 years now. And my biggest concern with Goonie is because I don't know if he's a male or female, and it is very possible for birds to start laying eggs very late in their life. I don't want to risk him having any health issues associated with me not knowing whether or not he's a male or female. So if there's no way to visually sex your bird, most people don't opt to surgically sex their bird. It's very expensive. It's very invasive. The easiest way, in my opinion, is to DNA sex your bird, which is very easy. I know a lot of people think it's extremely scary, and it's really not. What you can do is you can order testing. They're like little pieces of cardboard. You can put your bird's name and your name and your email address on it, and there's a particular spot on the card that is set aside for a few drops of blood. So what I did, I was over at Kim's for a weekend. We did a couple of her birds as well. Towel your bird. Take a pair of people nail clippers and very slowly start taking just tiny little bits off their toenail until you start to see, you'll notice when they start to, like, bead up with blood. Let go of the foot and let it work around a little bit and gently tap it on the card until there's enough blood. Some say, fill up that little circle. Others say a couple drops is fine. Grab a little bit of cornstarch or even flour will work, and just dab it on the end and hold it there for a couple seconds. Let your bird go, and your bird should be no worse for the wear. So if you have any questions about sexing your bird, please comment below. On that note, please don't say, this is what kind of bird I have, help me. If you're looking for a more detailed explanation, please send me an inbox message. As much detail as you can, that way I can help you as best as I can. Thank you for watching, and I hope you learned something.